Now it's time for Inspirational Women, and my guest, Geri Spieler, an investigative journalist and an author. Geri brings us a personal story set in historical fiction that I feel helps us get a better experience of the life and death challenges so many people face in our world. Geri brings us her book, Regina of Warsaw. Geri Spieler, good morning, and thank you so greatly for being with us this morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
I really appreciate having this opportunity because I really do appreciate the story, Regina of Warsaw, Love, Loss, and Liberation, just because it's so full of courage and so full of pain. And in a way, there's so many parts of it I feel that so many of us can relate to in part, or maybe a lot of it. And so I'm grateful to be able to have a conversation about it, make our listeners aware of its availability, its life in the world. So let's talk. You're welcome. So let's talk a little bit about the source of this. So it was inspired by your grandmother?
Yes, my maternal grandmother, Regina Antisemitic. Of course, I've known her life, all of my life. Mm-hmm. But a couple events happened that, because I was a nonfiction person, I was a journalist, so books, especially fiction, were nothing I ever thought of writing about until these little events happened. The first event was in 1995, and I was my son was studying Russian, met him in Russia. We went to Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and then we went to Warsaw. And we're walking down the street. My son Josh pulls this address out of his backpack, and he says, "Mom, my grandma, my mother, gave me this envelope with these names and addresses in Warsaw. Joseph and Janusz Antisemitic, my grandmother's maiden name." I said, "Josh, that address is 50 years old. Grandma said everybody died in the Holocaust. There's nobody alive." Well, the son, being smarter than the mother, says, "Let's see if we can find this address." I thought, well, okay, we don't have anything else on our agenda today. We found the address on this piece of paper, but we couldn't tell who lived there. So we went back to the hotel at the end of the day, and I went over to the concierge who spoke English. And I said, "Is it possible to find a phone number for these names?" And she says, "Yes, but the switchboard is closed at night. Come back in the morning." I went back in the morning. She found a phone number. She called it. Nobody answered. I said, yeah, not surprised. At the end of the day, I decided to go back to the concierge and ask her to try again. Josh was up in the room. Somebody answers the phone. And I'm talking to her in English, and she's translating it into Polish to this person on the other end of the phone. "I'm Regina Antisemitic Bloom's granddaughter, and I am in Warsaw. Does that name mean anything to you?" Because it could have been a coincidence. "Yes." I said, "Oh, well, I'll come to you. My son is here. He speaks Russian. Do you speak Russian?" "Of course I speak Russian." What a stupid question. I said, "We'll come to you." "No, the man says to stay at the hotel. He will come to you. Don't go anywhere." And I'm thinking, is this real? Who are these people with my grandmother's maiden name? Comes to the hotel. She calls up to the room. The man is here. He says, "Come down and bring your son," who speaks Russian.
Yes.
I'm telling you, Kate, the elevator doors open. I look out and I see that man. I recognize that man standing in the lobby. I can see a resemblance. So Josh is with me. We walk over to him and I introduce ourselves. He pulls out a little photograph from his pocket. It is my cousin's wedding. It's a photograph. My cousin was the first one to get married, and she's in it. Grandma's in it. My mother's in it. Her sisters are in it. I'm in it. He said, "Do these people mean anything to you?" And I'm going, "Yes." And Josh is translating who they are. And he says, "What happened to Regina? We haven't heard from her for 20 years. I'm guessing she died." "Well, I was at her funeral pregnant with Josh, who is now 20.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so it was like, yes, she died. Anyway, so we started, who's who, who's this, who's this. These two men, Joseph and Janusz, were my mother's first cousins. They were the son of one of her brothers, Zelman,
Oh.
and they were the only survivors of the Holocaust of her entire family. Two of her siblings died in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. Two of them died in the Warsaw Ghetto. Zelman died in the ghetto. Her sister, Regina's sister, went to Paris, and she survived. And by meeting my mother's first cousins in Warsaw, I also met their kids, which were my generation. Ola, Alexandra, was a scientist with Procter & Gamble. She was fluent in English. And because of her, I met Regina's sister's descendants, Chacha Vega's descendants, who are also my generation. And so we never knew about any of these people. I never knew about any of these people. Grandma didn't tell anybody she was writing to her nephews. And we can't understand, why?
Yeah, why?
Maybe because of what she went through. She was keeping them safe.
Mm.
That's the only thing I can think of, because I never got to ask her. So between these events that happened to me over the years, and looking at her and finding more information from these second cousins of mine, drove me to decide to write her story. But I made it historical fiction because there were so many pieces of glue that I had to create to link her life and finding out what she did. She and her sister, who wanted to get out of Poland, witnessed a pogrom. And a pogrom is a Russian word for a violent raid. And Russia was doing a lot of these raids in the Jewish communities, and that, of course, in Germany. So the anti-Semitic violence was growing in Eastern Europe at the time. There was also, I learned from one of my historian researchers, there was a small feminist movement in Poland at the turn of the century. Who knew? So they were starting to do things out of the home. My grandmother was a translator. She knew Russian, Polish, and Yiddish. And she translated for Eastern European political movement called the Jewish Labor Bund. It was a socialist organization. And the news of what was happening all over Europe was coming through. And she would translate these documents so other people could read them. But in 1906, there was a pogrom in Bialystok. Regina's sister, Chacha Vega, was working at one of the textile mills, and it was a community. The textile mills were growing. People were, now buying textiles and making their clothes. And so the Bialy River flows through Bialystok. And when Regina went to see her sister, that's when the pogrom, they survived it, but they were never the same. You could never be the same when you see that kind of slaughter. So their sense of anti-Semitism was much more heightened than people who hadn't seen it. And she kept telling her family, we have to get out of here. We have to get out of here. This isn't safe. This isn't safe. She ended up getting married and having a baby very young. Her sister wanted to get out of Poland, so she married a young new rabbi who was going to be stationed outside of Poland, and that's why she married him. This is, of course, all in the book. Yes. Regina decided that she could not raise her baby boy in that environment, left her husband, left her entire family, walked out of her life with this little baby. She had no language skills to leave the country. She had no marketable skills. She was alone, but she was determined not to be a victim. And she couldn't get her family to listen to her. Hence, they died. But she left. Had she not left, you and I would not be having this conversation.
Right, right.
But she did, all alone. She stopped in Paris to see her sister. Her sister said, stay. She said, I have to go to America. Europe is not safe. And we know what happened in France. The Nazis, went into France. So her sister and her husband were hidden by a Catholic priest and his family on their property in a basement for 4 years during the war.
Yeah.
Family took care of this rabbi and his wife and kids. Regina met another man in Paris. They got married. He wanted her to stay. She said, no, I'm leaving. He said, then I'm coming with you. So she and Morris, his name was Boutla, immigrated into the United States, and they were told, New York is really overrun. There were millions of Eastern Europeans, not just Jews, but Eastern Europeans fleeing Eastern Europe because of the violence. So I could find 10 friends who said, my grandma and my grandpa came over at the same time. But that's for them to write their story.
Right. Yes.
My grandmother came by herself with this baby boy and met this guy. They ended up in Chicago. They had 3 children. One was my mother and her 2 sisters. So there she is with 4 little kids. Grandpa abandoned her and the family. Disappeared. Never were able to find him. They tried to sue him, for support, get a divorce. He just went into thin air, and there she was with 4 little children in freezing Chicago. And true to her, she says, well, if I have to be poor, I also don't need to be cold.
Smart.
Jewish Family Services got her to Los Angeles. It's a lot warmer in LA. It's hard. It's easier to be poor in Los Angeles than in Chicago. But she couldn't really take care of these kids because she, like I said, she really had any skills. But Louis, the boy that she had, was older. He stayed with her. My mother and her sisters were put into a Jewish orphanage in Los Angeles called Vista Del Mar. And there were a lot of kids whose parents came over but couldn't take care of them. So it was more like a boarding school, although they went to public school, because they said, you have not given up your children. They are still your children. We're just taking care of them until you can get on your feet. They went to public school. It was a wonderful place. My mother and her sisters just raved about what good care they had. They were so supportive. They were loved. They were safe. And the director, well, the way it was designed was a very new design for orphanages. They were cottages for the girls and the boys based on age. And the downstairs was like a living room with a piano and a kitchen and couches. And upstairs were the rooms. So instead of feeling like you're in this big dorm with cots, it was almost home-like. He would go around to every cottage at night and ask the kids if they needed help with their homework. Because after dinner, they had to sit down with their books and do their homework. And he was there to make sure that they could, if they had problems with math or had to write something, he was there to help them. And my mom, they called it the home, said, we never knew there was a depression. This is now the 30s. We never knew there was a depression. We went to the beach. We went to the movies. We had all the food we needed. Life was good. And they were not far from the movie studios, and the movie studios donated clothes and let the kids come to see the movies. She said it was a wonderful place. They came out whole. They weren't damaged, which could easily be. And the minute you say orphanage, you go, oh my God, must have been horrible. This place was not horrible.
And Regina was able to visit them on weekends.
Yes, and they encouraged her to take them home for the weekend. Take them home on Friday or Saturday and then bring them back on Sunday.
Yeah. Now, what is your mother's name?
My mother's name is Dorothy Spieler. Her maiden name, they changed it from Boutla grandma to Bloom. So they were now known as it was Regina Bloom and Dorothy Bloom and Rose and Josie Bloom. Mm-hmm. Then my mom got married to Joe Spieler.
Okay.
And I kept that name. Oh, I've been married, but I kept that name. I'm still
Yes.
married, I kept that name.
And I wondered, so she was the youngest, and
Yes.
and she also, as you uh, describe in the book, just really well, all of them were grateful to their mother, even though, well, Louis didn't wasn't in the orphanage, but the girls
No,
were, and yes, they really seemed to have a good life from it.
they did.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing, this was very progressive for women back then. When you finished high school, if you didn't have a scholarship to go to college, and they couldn't afford to send kids to college, but they encouraged them and helped them get a scholarship if possible. But if you didn't get one, even though you were a girl, you still had to take some sort of training or aid to be able to support yourself. You could not depend on anyone else to support you. So my mother went to secretarial school, and she ended up being a secretary at a newspaper. My Aunt Rose was very talented. She went to beauty school, and she worked at the movie studios in their beauty salon. So she got to meet all the movie stars. And my Aunt Rose was really good in math, and she ended up in real estate school. So back in the 30s, they're telling these girls, you need to have a skill.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't common. You get married, you have babies, your husband takes care of you. Maybe not.
As was evidenced by their history,
Yes.
right?
And my grandmother, really drove that home, that you can't depend on anyone else to support you. You need to support yourself.
Right.
And Regina, as a grandma, was not lovey-dovey.
Yeah.
She wasn't a cuddly grandma. I never remember sitting in her lap and having her sing to me. She'd been through a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but she survived. And she more than survived. But, just to think now today of walking out of my life to a foreign country where I don't know the language, I don't have any skills for that country. She couldn't be a translator in the United States because her English wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
That's all she knew. They ended up finding a job for her at a bakery. So she was making some money to help pay the rent for her apartment and take care of Louis, but she couldn't take care of 3 other kids. Who was going to watch these kids when she was at the bakery?
Right.
But Louis was older.
And she thought that he could look after them, but of course, no, the rules, the law doesn't allow for that, nor would it have been fair to him. And as
No.
it turned out, it all worked out well. But I can appreciate, I mean, what a courageous woman. All the hard knocks she went through, landing in New York with not much money and deciding, these people are going to Chicago, maybe we should go. I mean, making those kind of spur of the moment decisions that are life decisions was, she just lived through so much and really finding 2 not so great men in her life.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, you can say in that case, she, of course, but what was interesting about this so-called grandpa, and whenever I asked her about it, she would just shrug and then change the subject.
Mm.
At first, I mean, they had a wonderful romance in Paris, and he was a jeweler. And you'd assume when he got to Chicago, he'd get a job as a jeweler. Really never understood why, was he a threat? Was it anti-Semitism? Nobody wanted to hire him as a jeweler. So, getting a job at a tannery was really for him beneath him. And he became more and more and more angry and found a way to get out of the situation. I'm going to open up a new, tannery in Houston, but I'll be back. And so he did go back and forth, which is enough to have 3 other kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when she got to LA and she got sick, she said, well, I'll just be gone for a day. She didn't know. Louis, you take care of the babies. You don't have to change, Dorothy's diapers or anything. And, Jewish Family Service, the social worker said, who's taking care of your kids? My son, he's 11. He's old enough. Not in this country, he's not.
Right. It was so much for the kids. And yet, he is the adult as he's your uncle. Um, and would you say that that had marred him in any way, or is he? I got that he just kind of took it all in stride, and he grew up to be a wonderful man with a family.
Yeah, Uncle Louis was very funny. I never understood his jokes because I was too young, but he would joke a lot, and he was a real whiz at math. His daughter, my first cousin Ida, got a PhD from UCLA and was a cancer researcher. He was very bright. Lucy, his wife, was very bright. And he was kind of like rolled with the punches. I don't remember Uncle Louis except in a way to smile. And he didn't, he didn't feel damaged or marred to me as a child and as an adult. And my cousin Ida, I know she felt very loved. She was very bright. She was very close to her parents. So in that case, I think Louis knew how to take on responsibility. That's for sure.
Yes, that really comes across so strongly in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only relative that I at this point don't understand is when my grandmother died and she found these letters. Fortunately, my mom saved one from grandma's effects, but she threw them away. And I remember when I came back from Poland and I said, well, my mother has this. What did you do when you saw these when grandma died and you were going through her stuff? I threw them away. What? Why would you throw them away? Obviously, your mother is writing to someone that has the same last name that she has. Doesn't that mean something to you? I don't speak Polish. And Rose, you live in Los Angeles. There's several universities. I'll bet you somebody at UCLA or USC or wherever speaks Polish. Well, maybe they want something. I never forgave her for that. We could have connected with them 20 years earlier.
Yeah. Yes.
And she could have gotten these letters, the ones that came translated so easily. I mean, and we didn't have Google then where she could, write it in Polish. She could go to UCLA, go to the language department. They'd be delighted to read these letters for you.
Yeah. It's amazing, how we just don't. Some of us don't cherish what we have at the time that we can really do something about it. I think about, wanting to hear my mother's well, I didn't want to hear my mother's stories as I was growing up. It's like, other things were more important. But as I got older, I started to write them down. But by then she was also not necessarily remembering everything. So we need to learn better and especially with so much movement that goes on in the world now, really to capture this and to be able to document it so we know these origin stories. We know what those roots are. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I got the manifest from the ship, the SS California, and showing Morris Bootlaw and Regina Bootlaw and little Louis coming from Europe to the United States. I got the intake papers from the orphanage that show the names. I have her becoming a citizen. The documents there coming into the United immigration papers. A lot of this has been scanned. If you reach out for it. The other thing, talking about parents, before my mother had any sort of memory issues, she never had Alzheimer's, but she would forget things. I interviewed her and I recorded it.
Ah, great.
And the beauty of it is I hear her voice and I hear her say my name.
Yes.
Which is just precious. But I got her life, mostly from the orphanage because she doesn't remember anything earlier than that. But she's the one that told me their grandma, I remember her not being loving-dovey, and she said, no, she wanted us, but she was not affectionate.
And in a way, you could understand that with all the hardship she endured, she had to just kind of be tough, I guess, just kind of hold it all together.
Yeah. It was, I so admire her. I think the message is believe in yourself. She knew what she needed to do, and she made it happen. And back then, it wasn't so easy for a woman to be that independent, and she felt ashamed and angry that her friends, especially her friends in Chicago that were surrounded her when Morris abandoned her and helped her get food and helped her get clothes. And I know in Los Angeles, Catholic Charities had the big food banks, and that's where she got food. And some of the government organizations in Chicago that I write about in the book, helping families, during that really tough time. So it was, how she managed that and how she recognized she had these really, really close friends in Chicago, but she had pride.
Yeah.
And she said, I can't let these people support me and take care of me. And she left. Again, she left.
Yeah.
But, she said, it's too cold here for the kids and getting them clothes,
Mm-hmm.
In that freezing weather.
So it was a good move, ultimately.
Yes.
Really. Not knowing, going into kind of this unknown, but it really worked out well, just as it was leaving Europe. And it's so important for us because we see so much going on with immigration now. I mean, immigration has been constant. I'm an immigrant myself, mind you, just from Canada, but still, we're all, in some way, immigrants are just a generation away from that. So really to read this story and to really develop that compassion and understanding is so critical, just because it does take all of us.
Yeah.
It's
this
important.
country was built on immigration.
Yes.
And our economy is supported by immigration. People are fleeing violence. If there's violence where you live, you don't want to be there. You don't want to have your kids there. Right. It's our history. These are our ancestors. And, I think to understand what they gave up, what they do still give up to move thousands of miles away to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
The sad thing is in this country, and I was just reading one of my newspapers online as well, is, the growth of anti-Semitism in the United States. And am I ready to walk out on my life? And where would I go? And I'm not great in multiple languages. Think about taking a baby and hopping on a train all alone is pretty remarkable. And the other immigrants who came here as well, fleeing the violence of Eastern Europe at the time. So I think the message for me when I finally decided to research and write this book was her guts of doing what she felt was right, although everyone was telling her she was wrong. You're overreacting. Look what you're doing. You're grabbing, your son away from his father, who didn't stop her from taking him. And you're leaving your whole family. She had a loving family. She had a loving home.
But it was the world that was forcing that to happen. They were not accepting and living in peace as they had for some generations. But no, at that time, really, she had no choice. So that what it took, the guts it takes to make a move like that.
And I do really think that because of what her sister and Regina witnessed, pushed her over the edge by seeing that pogrom and people slaughtered, raped, all kinds of, things that were happening that I write about in the first chapter, of witnessing this carnage.
Yes.
And the fact that her sister survived, because Regina was hiding in a closet, and then her sister not knowing if she was pregnant. and feeling like if I have this baby, I'll shame my entire family. My life will be over.
And, that's another big part of the story. Of course, the central character is a woman, but just really understand the strength, the fortitude, just the way things were in the world and how the women persevered, how Regina persevered is such an incredible story and really important for us to gain understanding just in general and then specifically. So, unfortunately, our time is really winding down. So we should make people aware of the book is available through all of our favorite book sources, right, Geri?
Yes, and libraries, if they don't have it, you can ask the library to get it. You can get it on my website, gerispieler.com, and it's at Barnes & Noble and Amazon. It's very easy to find.
Yes, and we owe it to ourselves to read the story, to learn more, and then I think it helps us to grow in understanding and then in acceptance, which is what our world really so needs. So I am grateful to you, Geri Spieler, for your writing and certainly for taking time with us today.
Thank you for having me. This was delightful.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of a very full hour of Inspirational Women with Geri Spieler and Sunday Morning Magazine with Christine Saxman. I'm Kate Daniels, your host, and I greatly appreciate your sharing this hour with me and these special guests. For details you might have missed or information you'd like to know, please just send me an email, kated@warm1069.com, and I will get right back to you. Also, if you'd like to listen again or share these important stories with your family and friends, find the podcast on our Warm 1069 webpage. Just click on the Listen tab, then Podcasts, then either of the show names, and then look for the guest names. I now wish you and your family a day of seeing the beauty and value of every single person, every single life. Have a week of the same, and then please plan to join me again next weekend for another hour of Sunday Morning Magazine and Inspirational Women on Warm 1069. Good morning.